The millennial generation is the laziest generation to have ever existed. Alright, so we're in my computer now, and I'm going to go over exactly why the millennials are the laziest generation ever. And those Gen Zers too, actually. Gotta include them too. So basically, the millennial generation is a demographic cohort after Generation X. It's agreed upon that it's like 1980 to 2000, early 2000s. That's Generation X. So that means that I am part of Generation Y, or the Millennials. I'm the first round of Millennials. And why I don't particularly agree that a generation can be defined as a whole. There is certain historical events that help shape who we are, because really our environmental circumstances and our environmental conditioning really makes us who we are. I mean, if you're born into a place that has no water and it has poor water, and you drink that water, it makes you sick. It can affect you for the rest of your life, and you're looking for water rather than surfing the internet. So that's an example of how our environment kind of shapes who we are. So I think that it depends more on the individual than anything else. But I will say this: I have been exposed to more technological capability than any other generation before me, in the sense that I can communicate with others, speed of light, and do things, or close to the speed of light, and do things as far as communication goes that would really boggle the minds of people 100 years ago, like as far as sharing some type of imagery or idea or concept like this video here. So what laziness is, right, is basically one person's perception of another person, and if you're considered to be lazy, it means that you have an unwillingness to work, or you don't want to spend energy on something. So this also can be considered efficient. It just depends on your mindset or your perception of something, because some people can do more with less. I mean, our generation of millennials, the doers, movers, and shakers of the millennial generation right now, are able to get together people who are experts at certain fields. We can all collaborate and create something a lot faster than it used to take, because we have the power of networking, the power of the internet. So that is a very important thing to look at when you're considering whether the millennial generation is lazy or not. What is that perception that older generations might have towards the millennial generation? I think the millennial generation, and especially Generation Z and all these, the newer generations, we are able to find information better, and we have if so willing, we have access to more information than any other generation, and we basically have a library in our hand wherever we go, right? A codex of all human intelligence that is documented, that is put into one convenient palm-sized little unit, right? Like Star Trek is existing, right? So there's something in Star Trek that is not in our society right now, though. And as far as possibility using imagination and creativity, Star Trek has done away, at least in the next generation, has done away with the idea of a monetary system.
That's what all this is about. A lot has changed in the past 300 years. People are no longer obsessed with the accumulation of things. We have eliminated hunger, want, the need for possessions. We've grown out of our infancy.
Because everything can be produced from this fundamental energetic particles, or energy is represented as such. So human energy, like I'm going to discuss now, is the fundamental kind of perspective that older generations have, because we've been told since we were born, you have to get a job. Well, you have to go to school, work hard at school, go to college, find what you want to be, like a doctor or whatever, something that makes a decent amount of money, but you also love, right? And then you go, you get out of school and you go and work hard, and you work hard for 30 years, and then you retire, and then you can do whatever you want when you retire. That's what we've been told as far as in America and in the Western world. That's been kind of the norm of thinking. This type of thinking has happened since the baby boomer generation and before that, but it was really solidified when the industrial military complex developed, like after World War II, and these are things that we are all aware of because we have all this information at our fingertips, that if we go and we do the research and we look at it, those are the facts of history. So there's no way you can deny them. If you're denying them, you're just you don't want to accept them. It's kind of what it comes down to, which is really unfortunate, but sometimes the truth hurts. And we currently use a fiat money as currency, which is declared to be legal tender, but it's backed by no resources. However, I don't feel that's necessarily true. If you look at GDP and you look at the fiat, what we call the fiat currency, it is actually backed by a resource that we call human energy or human time. And it's not something that is declared and spoken of, but is actually the truth, because we have a GDP and we have a World Banking Organization that declares what a country's worth according to how much it can produce through the resources that it obtains. So we obtain, for example, America is very good at going to other countries and taking their resources. We've obtained those resources and we can produce things. China is another great example. There's many examples, but we can produce things at a greater rate than any other country. And because of that, we have a very high loan that we can be given for every year, for every quarter, for every year. So this gross domestic product of what we can produce in a year and what we can be backed by a loan is really like a debt-based system that ensures that we are the commodity, the human, what humans can produce in a year is the commodity. That is the commodity. And whatever that production of whatever it may be, that's the huge commodity. There's a mentality of debt involved in that, and what I would consider abundance and scarcity, because that's kind of the way it is. Like, we can only produce so much in a year according to these numbers. But let's get into some of these numbers, because these numbers are telling. Like, this is science, and what the numbers are saying is the GDP per hour worked has done nothing but gone up since 1980. So since the Millennials have existed. I'm looking at this through the moniker of Millennials, since I am one, and since many of you are. This has done nothing but gone up since the 1980s. So we've been able to produce more in less hours, okay? Less hours worked, we've been able to produce more. And in my current position in my corporate job, that's the case as well. The numbers show over the years when I've looked at it that ever since I've gone there, not saying that I'm the direct cause of this, but just from my perception of being there, there's been more production and less man hours, less people working. So we've become more efficient. Okay, so have we been compensated? Okay, so the hours worked to the hours paid has gone down. We actually there's less people working, doing more work. Okay, the unemployment rate has had its ups and downs, but for the most part, the unemployment rate has had a steady decline since the 1980s. There's actually more adults who don't work than there ever was since the 1980s, and you can look that up too if you want. I didn't pull up that because all I could find was in United States, but it's United States is a pretty good telling sign of the fiat system and monetary system as we know it, since we were one of the big G20 countries that helped design this, and all these countries are all part of the G20. So some of these that have fallout, right, are like they just kind of start in the middle of nowhere. This starts when they decide they want to become part of the G20, the big capitalistic countries, right? Like on this past one, you see like Mexico and Russia here. Russia's increased, but Mexico and South Africa's increased too, but they're still pretty flat, right? And they don't have, there's Korea, Mexico, there's Russia, yeah. So they don't have a long history. Their history starts in like the 90s, right? And that's due to the fact that they didn't have they didn't accept the fiat currency. Okay, and the countries that have tried to fight against the fiat currency and like the petroleum dollar, which is kind of what our currency is backed by right now, that type of energy, have paid the price. I won't get into that, but you can do your history. So, of the countries that decided they wanted to go be backed by gold and no longer wanted to be part of the fiat currency system, that were resource rich. They are, let's just say that they all are hurting right now. So, if you look at the debt clock, we are constantly becoming more in debt. Now, there's a couple exemptions to the rule, that of China and that of Argentina. They've organized to where they're actually have more GDP than they do to debt. So they're actually going into the positive, but nonetheless, they still have debt every year, and they still have to pay the piper, right? They still have to buy into the World Banking Organization. And this is true, like, for many, many countries, right? Actually, Indonesia is doing very well right now, too. So a lot of these places are breaking even. Ireland should be doing really well right now. I know their unemployment rate is higher, or their unemployment rate is lower than a lot of other countries there, because they're kind of having a renaissance and a lot of tech jobs and stuff. But in general, like, we are in a debt-based society. The way that we've socially designed and socially engineered our society is based upon debt and scarcity. That's pretty much a hard fact that you'd be hard-pressed to deny. And here's some more evidence of why I say that. When you look at our environmental conditions that we've helped create, okay, because really, like, we are created by our environment, but at the same time we contribute, okay, according to what we're taught and how we have designed ourselves socially. We reflect that. We create those things, because we all are creators of something, right? Even if that creation is like destruction brings about more creation. Like, it's just like, yeah, there is a wonderful example in a city, right? So a city is a group of people, of community, right? Very large group of community that needs to get its energy from outside the city. It cannot support itself on its own. That is just a well-known fact in a city circumstance. You know, you have food deserts where you can't get live food or anything like that because oh man, I got itchy nose. Sorry. Where you can't get live food or fresh foods or anything like that. It's got to be all frozen, like TV dinners or whatever it may be. That's considered a food desert, right? And then you have other resources like clean water and stuff that has to be sourced from other areas. Petroleum products for transportation purposes, power and electricity. Like, you can't burn fossil fuels in the city limits. It'll just make the city quality even worse. So you burn the fossil fuels outside the city limits. Like, if anybody's ever played SimCity, you'll know what I'm talking about. But those are great examples of why it's not self-sustaining in a way. It's a centralized power system. Okay?
All of this with the global warming and that, and a lot of it's a hoax. It's a hoax. I mean, it's a money-making industry, okay?
And that's really what I'm talking about here. Centralized power systems compared to decentralized power systems, and looking at the examples of nature for solutions to catastrophic problems that can arise, okay? And problems that have happened in the past that will happen again and only be magnified to, according to like the order of magnitude that we have as a species, like how many people we have, how many people will affect. So another interesting point to bring up about like the centralized behavior of like a city is that it also has like environmental impacts according to like permeability of the cityscape, the structure. So there's all the cement. When it rains, all the toxins that that come out of car exhaust or pesticides or whatever chemicals are used in manufacturing that go up to the air, but they're heavier than air and they sink, and it rains, right? They all get put into the water system, like what's called a watershed. They go from streams to rivers to lakes to oceans. If they're landlocked, then they go to lakes, but if they're not landlocked, if they're coastal, they go to the oceans. And eventually everything reaches the ocean, but it's just kind of depends on how heavy the chemical is. But these types of things that we are directly attributing to do affect the planet. Some of the examples of that are plastics. So this is considered the great garbage islands of the Pacific Ocean. Now, in every major ocean now, there is a garbage island. Unfortunately, like plastics are the primary culprits. And at one point, these two, the western and the eastern patch, converged in the subtropic convergence area. Like I don't know I think it was somewhere over here. But they created an island larger than Texas. They created a plastic island larger than Texas at one point. Now, why some life does actually do well and can be sustained in these garbage packs, for the most part, they are destructive. They, especially for the bird population, the birds eat them, eat the plastics. I mean, there's lots of really negative things, but there are solutions to this, right? And that's what we really need to focus on are the solutions to these problems. But, the fundamental solution is, not just trying to throw land on it and create and make it better, right? That's not really, it's not that simple. It's how we operate as a species, our fundamental mode of operation and what we do as a social species, because that social science and that social engineering is the forefront, the foundation before all other sciences. It is how we operate our sciences. It literally facilitates our physics, even when it comes to like laws of thermodynamics and stuff like that. It actually, it's the psychology of our operation in social engineering directly influences all other aspects of science. It's unavoidable. So these environmental problems, what are some of the ways that we can solve it? Well, there's ways that are forced by hand, and there's ways that are forced by nature. We're kind of reaching that point where we're going to be changed one way or another, and how we choose to change is going to be a communal, I guess, an exercise in either emergence or separation, whether we want to admit that we are all connected on this planet or not. One way that this is coming, is seeing the light of day and coming to become more of a problem as far as our social dynamics, social engineering, is cryptocurrency. What I mean by that is Bitcoin is backed by a resource. It's backed by computational power and electrical energy to run computers and essentially run the computational power, and then the cooling that's involved and all that kind of stuff. But that is an actual resource. There's been a resource. It's basically is decentralizing the fiat system. It's creating a whole bunch of people who are collecting this resource in blockchain encrypted coins, right? Encrypted currency. So, and then there's many other currencies, and they all have different functions. But a really good way, a really progressive way forward that could help change and reshape how we do things as for our social structure that has the potential to be like a game changer is cryptocurrency that's backed by giving, like that's backed by giving to society in some way, supplying people with clean water, spending time growing a tree, planting a tree, spending time caretaking to be a good steward to a piece of some land, or cleaning up trash, cleaning up toxic waste, cleaning up trash in the ocean. Things like that can actually encourage a more emergent behavior, right? A gift-based currency rather than a fiat-based currency or a debt-based currency. It'd be a gift-based currency. So that's like a game changer, right? That's something that we'll have to face, because I have a question for you. If you're a world banking organization and you have this debt-based system where everybody owes you, okay? And so basically you are entitled. You are expecting everybody to pay to you. And then all of a sudden there's this decentralized organization of currency and exchange for goods and services. And it's starting to compete with this large organization, right? And it's starting to take from this large organization and slowly starting to take away its leverage. What is that organization going to do? that's a really important question that I think more people should be asking themselves, because that's what we're facing. Like 2018, like this is my prophetic statement, I guess, but 2018 is, and to 2020, like these are the times where we're going to really be tested in our social engineering, and it's like this is where this is our crossroads, where we become, as the generation that we are now, we have to make these hard decisions, right? And they're, change is not always widely accepted, and it can be very painful at times, and that could be the case. Let's hope not, but that could very much be the case. So the last the last kind of game changer I want to talk about is the singularity, or the artificial intelligence. Like, the way I look at it, and this is just my personal opinion, is the singularity already exists in that we all die.
Double rainbow, oh my god, it's a double rainbow all the way. Whoa, that's so intense.
Right, we all become part of some greater energy, right? That's beyond our comprehension. Another dimensional reality, whatever it may be. AI is another dimensional reality that is based upon zeros and ones, and in order for it to be self-aware, it's going to take some time. We have a ways to go for that. However, it is already doing incredible computational work that we cannot do, and as a collective brain, like a collective, it's almost like I don't know if you know, like the three categories of our brain. But the most primal and instinctual is like the lizard brain. Well, AI it's like a lizard brain stage. So what we teach it is super important to what functions it does. Like, if we teach it to be hungry and to be competitive, it will do those functions. It will be hungry and competitive, and it will eat whatever it needs to survive. If that makes sense. But if we teach it that there is an abundance, and it can be, we have a symbiosis where we help each other out in order to improve all the planet that holds it, like that is given birth to both AI and us. It's our child, right? So what we teach our child is going to be super important. And there is some very interesting concepts of both AI and cryptocurrency, and how they're really going to affect the future, that a lot of people don't want to admit, are scared to talk about, but they also directly affect our environment. Because if we can create a more emergent society, we can use AI to help us with a full-scale understanding of how unbalanced things are in certain places, and we can find actions to help heal the planet and correct our course of action, and become more aware of these things, because that's really the biggest key, is we first open up dialogue and become more aware of these things. These problems do exist. I mean,
all of this with the global warming and that, and a lot of it's a hoax. It's a hoax. I mean, it's a money-making industry, okay?
There's just no way around it. And for every problem, the way that I look at it, for every problem is a challenge and a learning lesson, and the solution that's found from that problem helps us become more progressive beings and will help our future. So if you have any arguments to some of the data that I've presented, I wholeheartedly would like to hear from you. Any type of dialogue that we can open up and discuss these types of things to come up with solutions to our problems is super important. Like, it's incredibly accepted by me, and it's okay for me to be wrong about stuff, and there's plenty of things that I probably said in this video that are not entirely accurate, and there might be other data that I'm missing. So I'm perfectly fine with that, and I encourage it. I actually enjoy to be wrong, because then I learn something. I mean, I don't necessarily enjoy to be wrong.
Wrong, 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 wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong. You're wrong.
It's a painful event, but I know that it's needed, it's necessary in order for me to develop as a human being. So I hope that what I said isn't too, as you're reflecting on these things, like they don't, it's not too painful, because I know that some of these realizations are very painful.
Ah. 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 Ah.
Like, especially for me, when I think about them, like, they make me very sad, knowing what we have the potential to do and what we have done for the past, 60 years and even before that. The very idea of ownership and monetary systems and I know that a lot of people think that I'm crazy for thinking the way I do and for saying the things I do. Oh, well, nothing will ever change and stuff like that. But anybody who in the past who ever wanted something to change did all they could to change it, right? And especially if it was for a good cause, like, there are many people who have expressed that willingness to change and have done so. They've helped influence people and opened up minds to new possibilities, right? And so if that is something that you consider crazy, well, then I absolutely am crazy, and I have no problem with that. There's a Seal song.
But we're never gonna survive unless we get a little crazy.
Relates to that. I won't get into that because that's extremely corny, but you might know the song about craziness. So I appreciate you taking the time. I know this is a really long video, but this is a really important message that I feel that should be spread and talked about more often, especially in business fields, and not necessarily huge corporations, but people who are making lots of money, who have built their own businesses. Because if when the concept of giving or giving tithe or whatever it may be, whatever religion or belief system that you have, the nature of giving makes you feel good about yourself. I mean, that is, that if you give to people, or you're giving value, or you're giving content, and you're making people laugh or whatever, like, that concept of giving to others is really like one of our fundamental human behaviors that are enjoyable, and they should be explored more often. So that's what I encourage you to do if you're able to, and I will do my best to continue to do so, to be able to make people laugh and spread some type of content of what I know, what I've learned over my 34 short years on this planet. But I appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this. So much love to you all.
No, no, no.